Thank you, Dean. Well, I am really excited about this morning. I feel like we're still learning this space and all the different things that work well in here, but I've been looking forward to this because it just feels like a conversational space, and to be able to have a chat with my good friend Bill while you all listen in is great. And I think I don't think it would be exaggerating to say that there are few people that have had greater influence on my life personally and on the life of New Day than Bill Bedell. And I'm super thankful for you, buddy. And so we've done these a few times, and Bill and I have been meeting on Tuesday mornings for more than a decade now. We were pushing Maya around in a stroller when we would first go for walks, and
Cheerios flying.
Yes, Cheerios flying everywhere, and they've just become this really rich time. We're usually at the Dash Point Starbucks on Tuesday mornings, but Bill has just such good insight when it comes to family stuff and just dealing with your own story. And so I thought it would be really fascinating to get his take on Gideon and Gideon's family stuff that's going on. And so we're just going to dive in. I'm going to read a little portion of the story that we've been going through of Gideon. And then I'm just going to kind of pick Bill's brain and see what it brings up for him. So, and it may bring stuff up for you. And we'll just see how this feels as we're going along. But it's okay to feel whatever you feel about how this conversation goes, and if it resonates, that's good. And I hope that God can take it and use it in whatever He's working on in your heart right now. So. This is the story of Gideon that we've been going through. Remember, the angel of the Lord came, and Gideon was down in that wine press trying to tread wheat out of... He was hiding, basically, doing this work to feed his family because the Midianites had taken over everything. And so they were living under this foreign power, and it was dangerous and a lot of pain. And God came and said, "You're a mighty warrior, and you're going to save Israel out of this situation." And here's the first thing that Gideon said about doing. It says, "That same night, the Lord said to him, 'Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height,'" this hilltop. "Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering." The Asherah pole, Asherah was another deity of the Canaanites, and so this was a tribute to this other god. And he's saying, cut that down and use it to burn the bull. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him, but because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. In the morning, when the people of the town got up, there was Baal's altar demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They asked each other, "Who did this?" When they carefully investigated, they were told Gideon, son of Joash, did it. The people of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son, he must die, because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, "Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. So, because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerubbaal that day, saying, let Baal contend with him. So, I read that and I go, this just brings up how family and faith can get all tangled up together. And I'm just curious, as you hear that story, what does it bring up for you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially during COVID. For me, there were some things that came up, especially with family struggles, where I really resonate with kind of hiding or feeling overwhelmed. And you know, it's one thing to sit with people individually, and yeah, you have insight on family and things like that, but it's also someone else's family, so you get to be objective, right? So one of the things, you know, there's a lot of story that's not mine to tell, but for me, my experience was, oh man, like there are triggers and overwhelming things that are coming up for me. My fears are coming up, my anger is coming up. And I started to realize how limited I felt in certain areas. Even though I knew particular things that I could do, or in fact, sometimes that's a hell in and of itself, like knowing categories and knowing what you should do.
Right.
But it's interesting, like, you know, even the idea of me breaking down Gideon, right? I think it's even kind of funny. Like, I think Gideon would have more to say to me about, like, hey, what are you doing with this part? As much as I could see into him, I'm sure he could see into me, in terms of what are these things that are limiting you, and like, how do you step into those? And what I've found is in some ways a different aspect of grace that I hadn't experienced prior to that, which in some ways was a real kindness around the fact that my humanity is very limited, but also that my story is very packed with things that are not built on trust or space or room to make particular decisions. So I think this period of time really revealed to me not only some of my failures, but why those failures happen, and that I don't really need to shame myself in those, though I did at times. The reality was more that God was meeting me in this place where I was, knowing that I was very limited around a particular thing. That doesn't mean I'm not gifted in other areas or don't do good things, but it was revealed to me like, hey, you're trying to do something when you don't have room to do it. And so through apologies to my family and different things, like that felt good, but it also helped me realize, like, I don't need to deal with everything perfect, but that God does meet you in those places and wants to create space. He's not worried so much about my limitation. He can work through that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. We were talking last week a little bit about that concept, and I'm going to skip ahead here. One, that's what Gideon's name means, though, by the way, is to cut down. And, you know, thinking about breaking these things down, we talked about, you better remember the $5 phrase that we used last week to talk about these little limits.
Plausible something.
Plausibility structures, yes. That's really kind of, you know, we're talking about this idea of limits and being
For sure.
only thinking a certain way. And I resonate with that too, being stuck in and trying to press against these boxes. And I mentioned last week about when I was talking with my brother about that, and he said, you know, the thing that helped me is to go, wall's not really there. And when I was talking with you about that, you said sometimes even when they're not there, it doesn't really change we're still feeling it as if it is there. So talk more about God meeting us there within those limits and like what that looks like.
Yeah, I think we had a good discussion yesterday. One of the things that we were talking about are just particular thoughts or beliefs that we have about ourselves or experiences that set walls around us to make us feel limited in who we are, or to make us feel maybe less valuable or worthless, or maybe looking at pedestalizing other people or whatever. Some of those limits we come by honestly, whether it's our family structures or whether it's experience with peers or whether it's our own failures or our own struggles. I think evil uses those to reinforce, to make sure that we don't get outside of those. Some of walls that we encounter are not self-imposed, but others imposed, where in particular places, for me, trust is a huge issue. Christy said a couple of weeks ago, she said, sometimes it just seems like you hate church. And sometimes I do. I really do. But that doesn't mean I don't want to be here. I've learned to sit with that feeling of like, I hate church, but I'm not necessarily sure always why. But then there are things that I know about my experience with spiritual communities, or my dad's role in church and how big that was for me. Like when he's asking Gideon to go down, getting him in the lime press, he meets him in the middle of his protection, his fears, his struggles. He goes and gets him. He's not waiting for Gideon to come to him. And Gideon responds by like, my family is the least, I'm the least, right? Like that makes a lot of sense to me. I think one of the cool things about working with people is that it's not my brain or my expertise or whatever. Literally, it's the pain and the experiences that I've been through along with the gifting. When I've allowed those to coalesce, or if God's made those coalesce, that's what makes it dynamic, right? It's not so much that, I'm some brilliant guy. Like, the reality is I can look into someone's life and relate to it. So sometimes people have an expectation of like, oh, well, you're a counselor, you should probably know about this, right? And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what the hell that is. Like, but I could sit with you and we could probably figure that out, like on some level. But that space, whether it's self-imposed or others imposed, or maybe it's something that you had to do in your family, maybe it's a role you played, maybe it's what made you feel valuable. Sometimes we trust those things more than we do Christ. Sometimes those things really helped us get through particular parts of our life. So it's hard to let go of those in any context. You don't need to have a terrible story, right? Right. It's hard to let go of protection and ask God to be with you, receive you, things like that.
Well, especially I think when it is feel like it's going against your family rules. I mean, Karn talks a lot in family communications class about high-stress families have 3 rules of don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And you move against those things, and it feels like internally like you're going up against, even if you want to break out of the limits, you're also violating something that's kind of sacred.
Sure. You could also live in a family as a counselor and, talk, feel, and say everything.
Right.
That drives people nuts,
yes.
right? Like, yes. So, you can talk to any of my kids about that, or my wife, or me sometimes. Like, sometimes I don't want to know this. Like, I'd rather just watch TV and, act like things are fine, right? But part of me doesn't get that, place. One of the things that we talked about were some of the self-imposed things that we felt stuck in the box in. I don't know if you wanted to share anything about that. This is
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, we were talking about, and I've shared, I think fairly often about my own struggles with being a pastor. And being in the role has been a challenge for me, and has often felt like I have a limit in my mind around being it because of my own family history, and my dad had some real strong belief, continues to have some strong belief about secular work being really full-time Christian service. You don't have to be a pastor. You don't have to be a missionary or something to be really a good Christian. And yet, so the way I kind of internalized that was almost that clergy then was bad or worthless. Or so then try doing that job well when you're also it's an impossible bind. Then it becomes this place where you can't. And I've done some work around that. I think also in that then. We were talking yesterday about thinking about New Day and going, boy, New Day is sure shrunk down and small and feeling confined in a lot of ways, and going, oh, sometimes I feel like I'm the limitation, I'm the wall, and to be able to get out of that box of seeing myself as I've referred to myself as the bottleneck for years, and going, how to begin to move out of that into the place that we talked about of God's abundance for us. And you said something about us not being the ones who are actually creating the space. It's God who's doing that. And so sometimes when it feels like we've got to knock these things down, how do we move closer to the walls and getting more space when we're also needing to depend on God to do that?
Sure. Not that I have all the answers to that, but I'm going to keep the spotlight on you just a little bit more. So the whole thing about being the bottleneck, right? One of the things that hit me about that, we've been friends forever. Not forever, like, oh my God, but forever. In my mind, one of the reasons why I'm even up here or even talking in church has a lot to do with my wife's faith, but also your friendship, right? So the spaciousness around my struggle is an experience that I've had with you. Like, I get to be who I am, I get to struggle, I get to tell you all the things I don't like about church, and you just kind of nod and drink your tea, right?
They don't let you swear up in front of church here.
Did I say?
No.
Oh,
We can edit it out later.
that'd be fair. Like, it's one of my gifts. But, like, when you were referring to yourself as the bottleneck, I mean, that's why I was even asking you to come on Saturday, right? Because it occurred to me, like, there are things that I believe about myself or things that you believe about yourself that simply aren't true. They just feel true. The week before, you were talking about how you were sad that a lot of people won't come into church and look, as a community of faith to help them kind of understand the world and look for a place to be received or heal or whatever. And I thought about that idea of space, right? Like, people in here, everyone, we're all limited in certain ways. Christ isn't limited, but we are, right? And if we don't have a place where we can be ourselves and be limited and be honest, right, then how can we offer the gospel to people, right? That's probably what's most confusing, is that Jesus is so expansive and we're so limited, right? So when we give that limited view, I think people don't want to be here, right? They're like, well, if I have to change all these things, if I have to be something different than who I am, then literally I have to push off all of this story. I have to get rid of all these things that are actually quite valuable. Like, some of the most painful things in my life are why I'm good at what I do. It's not the only reason, right? But if we are required to get rid of those to be something, then we never really know if we're loved, truly. So when you were talking about that to me in terms of the bottleneck or My experience with church has not been anything like what you and Karn provide. And I'll just brag on them a little bit. This is unique. This is different. And I don't really care how many people we have.
Thank you. I really like what you were saying about Christ being spacious, and that really that feels relieving in the sense of going, when I don't feel spacious, I can still help other people find space as I can point them in the direction of Christ, because he doesn't have the limits. I like that. I like something else that you said when we got together earlier of that even our brokenness can be expansive. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, even with COVID and the experiences that I have in my family, or if you go back further and you start to ask, like, you know, and I've asked this question different, the more space I've had from it. But my dad's death was a big deal to me in terms of what did, or why did God not do things about that? But that question has changed for me. What I started to realize is one of the gifts of my dad's death, or the way that he lived his life, was that he was a brilliant man. He was beautiful in a lot of ways and abusive in others. But he never cut down poles. He never went back and looked at his family and went like, you know what, these things are standing in the way of me being truly like who I'm made to be. As his son, I got to watch that, and that was painful because I could see that that was true, but I couldn't do anything about it. And so one of those realities, like when you think about brokenness being expansive, that's why I have that in my mind, is that if my dad would have dealt with pain, right, then he would still be here. There would be a difference in the way that he dealt with things, and he had such impact on people. I felt like as that pain manifested itself in my life, and now I can look at it different, I want to be there for people differently, knowing that I'm not like my dad in certain aspects, and very much like him in others. And so there's that sense of letting those two things coalesce. So the more that I can allow brokenness there, right, the more freedom I have. The more brokenness, and that's not the only thing, please. It's not just like go around and feel pain and then you'll be better. That's not all of life. That's ridiculous. The idea is you can learn just as much from freedom, just as much from blessing, just as much from stepping in, risking, and seeing the reward of something, right? So that's why a lot of people don't want to come into counseling, because it's just a big fat bummer, right? And people are like, well, you just need to cry more and then you'll be better. Well, no. But the other part of that is like, okay, if we're broken and we're all these other things that are beautiful and amazing, then God sees where we are. He sees our limits, but he's not worried about them. We are, right? And then the next part is, okay, if I'm willing to be broken, then I'm willing to be human, like, and vulnerable. Dean was asking me, hey, what are the 3 points that you will walk out of here today with, right? And I love Dean about that, right? He wants to know, right? That's how he thinks. I have no idea what the 3 points that you'll walk out of here with, right? But I'm going to ask Dean later what the 3 points are, so I can figure out what I said, right? The conversation with Karin just prior is, what do you do when your kids no longer need you the way that they needed you in the past? And I was like, hell, I don't know, right? Like, I'm figuring that out just as long, but it does leave more space. So brokenness is what God can enter. Brokenness is what God had done all along the way. And ultimately, it's brokenness that brought him to the cross, right? That he accepted what that was going to be like.
Yeah.
So I find that to be really expansive. Like, because if I can be broken and, made in the image of God, then, gosh, I can be human, then I can receive.
Yeah.
Then grace can get in. Then I have a need for healing.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes, I think someone said, if the boxes are there, it's more familiar, it feels safer.
Sure.
And I think about Lucy, C.S. Lewis, where she's like, is he safe? And she's like, no, but he's good.
Yeah.
There are good places that we can step into. But one of the things that I see most often when people come into my office is that they have very little space around a particular thing. They're not bad. They don't need to be ashamed. They're not worthless. They're just stuck inside something they can't move in. And part of what I try to offer is what God offers, which is spacious, loving, compassionate, kind, understanding. And he's very, very expansive that way. He can offer as much as we need.
So let's say somebody's feeling in the constricted space, and they don't have room, but they don't know why, and they can feel it, but they haven't identified it. And not everybody is going to call you and come in for a session.
Oh, thank God, that'd be a lot.
But good job, security.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who are trying to identify and become more aware of what those places are?
The cool part about our conversations leading up to this, right, is just about awareness of things. So there was parts where you're saying, hey, I just had an epiphany, like I just became aware of something.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think I heal anybody. I think Christ is the healer of people. I think I get to sit alongside of that.
Yeah.
One of the first things that I assess is like, what is somebody aware of? Right? Because if you're not aware of something, you can't do anything about it. Right? I think one of the gifts of this last 2 years, even though they've been painful, hard, disruptive, is that it made me aware of a lot of things that were limiting. Not that I'm a bad person or, I could focus on what I didn't deal with well. What I came to understand is I didn't have space to respond to particular things when it all goes sideways sometimes. And then that's what I was asking for. I was asking for more awareness. My wife makes me aware of my limitations, right? Like, which is great. Like, I love her for that sometimes. And then, we go back and forth. But I'm starting to see more compassionately myself in that way, my kids in that way, my family in that way, the people I work with in that way. Is that if people, when they're in the state that they're in, have a place where they can be accepted and loved, then that gives them the opportunity to become aware and then be curious, kind, compassionate toward themselves. Yeah. I think we were talking about how New Day would show up for pretty much anybody if they were in trouble. And one of the things that we need to learn to do is show up for ourselves around where we're in trouble and offer that same energy, right? The more that you expand, the more that you are aware, the more that you can receive, the more that you can offer, right? So I want to be a church community that helps each other for sure and loves each other. But I also want people to be able to take care of themselves internally, and God is already waiting in those places, right? We just may not be aware of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, let me check. How are we doing on time here? Do we open it up? Does anybody, as you've been listening to this, anybody have a question for Bill that you'd want him to follow up on something that he said? Not for me, for Bill.
Or for Jeff.
Well, I wanted to just touch on what Bill was saying about space, because I didn't know what I was going to do with church most of my life. didn't know what to do. Still believe in God. But you and Karen made space. There was a space. I'm sitting here today because of the space. Jesus with you.
Thanks, Ron. Ron was saying he believed God, but didn't know what to do about church. And at New Day, he found space.
I think
So,
you said you and Karen actually.
Well,
space. Yeah.
he's wearing a mask, it's hard to hear.
Oh, yeah.
So,
See,
anyway.
Bill,
Thank you.
I have told them many times.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
I said, well, I was here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So,
I just had a thought about how we're talking about Gideon thinking that he's too little. But I think our limitations can be also from thinking of ourselves as too big. Like thinking that you're the bottleneck is kind of like thinking that you are the it all. Like there's no bigger things outside of it that are maybe at play, things in the society or in the world, globally or within people's lives that are much bigger than what we the place where we put ourselves.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that is really good for if anybody couldn't hear that, and for the people watching online. The point was that Gideon was thinking he was too small, and we can also get in trouble. We can see ourselves as too big, or sometimes thinking of ourselves as too small can be thinking too much of ourselves as too important in the process. I think that's really a good point.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the same thing right now in a very different situation where I feel like I'm responsible for more
Yes.
than I'm responsible for, which makes me stuck.
That's the key word, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting, like my struggles this year with my family have been about the sense of over-responsibility. And over-responsibility is another hell unto itself, right? Because then underlying that is a sense of the inability to make it happen, right? So you get stuck in this no-win situation, is that I don't really have enough to make this happen, and yet I have to figure it out, right? One of the interesting things about my church experience is growing, I didn't come to know Christ until I was 19, but I got saved into a Pentecostal church. And some things about the Pentecostal church are amazing, and some of them are cracked, right? Just like anything else. But I happened to be sitting in a church service, and we had some people come in, and they had the gift of prophecy or words of knowledge or different things like that that kind of permeate that particular brand of faith, right? Well, I had sat in there. I don't even know why I was there. I just sat in there, and then somebody walked down, and they put their hand on me. I'm like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? Right? But it was interesting. He said, you think you need to be a big oak. I hate being up front sometimes. Okay, so you think you need to be a big oak, but I'm going to chop you down. And I'm going to lay like boards down, and people are going to walk on. I think part of the mix of that is where I understand what you're saying and what Gideon's saying, right? Like, wait a minute, some of these things are, like I grew up around a big oak, but it wouldn't let himself be cut down. So trusting God to cut me down has been the hardest thing for me. And it's part of why I don't like church. Like I don't want to come in and get cut down, right? Like I want to kind of know stuff and just kind of do it, which just sucks. Like it doesn't work, right? So when you're saying, yeah, we're going to pick Bill's brain, like you're actually going to get into my chest if you start talking to me, right? Like the idea is God had it in mind a long time ago to cut me down and put me on the ground, right? So that not only would I heal, that's how to heal. Like you don't need to be a big oak. That's very hard to lay down for me. Like I was I needed to keep the big oaks alive. Like I felt like I needed water growing up. And then I had to leave that. So one of the first things he says to Gideon is, we got to chop this stuff down. We got to sacrifice. He's doing it at night. He's scared about the Midianites. His dad, I don't know. Some people say he's a hero, but he comes out and he's like,
Right.
let Baal figure it out. Well, what the hell? Like, why? Like, why are, that's not really defending his son.
Sure.
But anyway, that's how I perceive it. But the whole point is, like, God, I think a long time ago, was like, okay, I can see you in the wine press. And I've just been kicking back at him for a long time, which is, I don't want to be more responsible.
Yeah.
So God was saying, hey, I'm just going to pull you into the center of things, and I'm going to take care of that stuff. So Dean, I didn't have 3 points, but that's why, is that I feel like if I'm vulnerable to what God is asking me to do, he'll just pull me to the center of something, but not be in charge of it.
Yeah.
To just lay something down and let people pick it up if they want to. One of the things that's so cool about New Day is that it's not arrogant. It's not telling people what to do. It's offering a space for people to be who they are, and for God to meet them in that. So.
Well, and I think it's interesting when you first told me that story, and I thought about, at first what I heard was the people are going to walk all over you, but really I thought, man, how God is using you is to create this platform that is creating space for people, and yeah, I love that.
And I think it's the hardest thing to do in your family. So easy to do for other people.
Yeah.
Where we fail the most is our family, because it's the most fearful, hard, crazy thing that we're doing, because we're most vulnerable to it. That's where we make all our crazy mistakes. Then we can go out and help other people do their thing, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going home and I'm losing my crap, like, well, of course, right? Like, I'm just a person too. And that's the humbling, cool part of it, is that I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be broken. And I need to let God meet me there. And then, later on, my kids will understand that different, or I'll understand that different, whatever. I'm just very, very grateful that I didn't have to do it the way that my dad did. And so I can take beautiful things about him and move it forward. And then I'm allowed to own myself as I move forward, so I don't have to keep, going back and staring at poles all the time.
Yeah.
So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they show up. So you're walking along and then you run into one.
Yeah.
I don't go looking for them. I usually smack my head into them.
Right.
So.
And I guess that's the thing, especially in family situations, it's right there with you all the time.
And so when you take out the walls, you're exposed, right?
Right.
But Henri Nouwen was one of the guys I kind of walked along with in the journey. He wrote a book called Journey from Anguish to Freedom, Inner Voice of Love. And one of the things he was saying that I thought was absolutely brilliant is, like, you're going to have to leave the old country and go into the new country. He said the greatest pain that you carry is the pain of not being loved well. He said, but you have to understand that you're already being held in the new country. But if you do not grieve the things that hold you in the old country, then they will not die. So there's a part of just being broken and letting it happen, and then being received in this new place, right? And that's not a one-time thing. That's, over and over again. And it's nice to know that other people feel over-responsible. There's people here that feel like they don't measure up. There's people feel like they've done things but God is not ever really interested in that. He's offering, and what he does with Gideon is offer himself. He's like, you be where you are in your own strength, right? I'm going to take you and do these things. I'm going to transform it. So, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's good. And that it's to live out of being loved by God. That's it's helping people move into that space.
And that's not bottlenecky.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
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 It's a lot messier to be expansive,
Yes. Right.
but that's where I think people need to be met the most.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Love you.
Thank you. Love you too.
Yeah.
Can we give a hand? Let me pray, and then Derek's going to come and lead us in another song. So God, so thankful for Bill and for the truth that he's shared even today. God, I thank you for the impact he's had on my life in an ongoing way, and for the space he's given me. I don't know. I don't know where I would be in some ways without how you've used him. So I thank you for that. I thank you for all these reminders of our need to be willing to chop things down or be chopped down. God, we want to live in the expansive space of your love, and we want to lead other people into that as well. So, God, I pray that you would just increase the room in each of our hearts. And we're just grateful for this time today, God. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.